He kicked her rifle case across the floor and laughed while he did it. That was the first thing General Marcus Holloway did when he saw Emily Carter kneeling beside the firing line. He did not ask her name. He did not ask what she was doing there. He looked at the quiet woman in the plain gray jacket, decided she was nothing, and shoved her equipment aside with the toe of his boot like she was trash someone forgot to sweep up. And the young trainees laughed with him. If you are watching this, please take 1 second to subscribe to the channel and stay with me all the way to the end, because this story turns in a way you will not see coming. And do me a small favor. Comment the name of the city where you are watching from right now so I can see how far Emily Carter's story has traveled around the world. Now let me tell you what happened after that boot touched her rifle. Emily did not flinch. She did not raise her voice. She reached down, picked up the case, checked the latches with 2 fingers, the way a mother checks a sleeping child's breathing, and set it back where it had been. She did all of this without looking at the man who had just insulted her in front of 40 people. And that silence, that terrible calm, was the first clue that General Marcus Holloway had made a mistake he could not yet understand. He was a big man, loud in the way that powerful men become loud when nobody has told them no in 20 years. He had come to the Mojave training facility to observe the final evaluation of a class of Navy SEAL candidates, and he intended to be seen doing it. He walked the line with his hands behind his back and his chin lifted, and everywhere he stopped, instructors straightened and trainees held their breath. This was his world. He owned every inch of it, or believed he did. "Who let a civilian this close to a live range?" he said loud enough that the whole yard could hear him. He was not really asking, he was performing. A young instructor named Sergeant Bell cleared his throat. "Sir, that's our weapons specialist. She handles maintenance and calibration for the rifles." "Maintenance," Holloway repeated, and he smiled the way a man smiles when he is about to be cruel and wants everyone to enjoy it with him. "So she cleans them." "Good. Somebody has to." The trainees laughed again. Not all of them, but enough. And Emily just kept working, running a cloth along the bolt of a rifle that did not need it, because sometimes the only way to keep your hands from shaking with old memories is to give them something familiar to do. There was one trainee in that group who laughed the loudest. His name was Jake Morrison, and he was the kind of young man who had never lost at anything, which is a dangerous thing to be because it means you have never learned what losing teaches you. Jake was strong and fast and smart, and every one of those gifts had convinced him that the world was arranged exactly the way it appeared to be. And the way it appeared to Jake was simple. The strong belonged on the line. The rest belonged behind it. "General, you want us to show her how it's done," Jake said, grinning, playing to the crowd. "Maybe she can take notes," Holloway chuckled. "Careful, son, she might cry." Emily set the rifle down. She stood up slowly, and for one moment the entire yard went quiet because there was something in the way she rose to her feet that did not match the story everyone had been telling themselves about her. It was not the movement of a technician standing up from a bench. It was the movement of a soldier standing up from cover. Level controlled weight, already balanced eyes, already sweeping the field out of a habit she had never been able to break. Sergeant Bell noticed it. He did not know what it meant, but a small, cold feeling walked up the back of his neck, and he could not have told you why. "Is there a problem, sir?" Emily asked. Her voice was steady and low and almost gentle. "Because if there is no problem, I have 11 more rifles to check before your evaluation, and I'd like to finish before your candidates start putting rounds downrange with scopes I haven't zeroed." Holloway blinked. It was a small thing, that blink, but it was the first crack. Nobody spoke to him that way. Nobody spoke to him with that much quiet certainty, like they knew something he didn't and were being kind enough not to say it out loud. "You'll speak to me with respect," he said. "I'm speaking to you with the truth," Emily said. "You can decide how much respect that deserves." For a second, just a second, Jake Morrison stopped grinning because he heard it too, that thing under her voice, that thing that did not belong to a woman who cleaned rifles for a living. Then Holloway recovered, and he did what proud men do when they feel a crack forming. He pushed harder. "Sergeant Bell," and he said, "since our specialist has so much to say, let's give her a chance to say it with results. Get her a rifle. Let's see if the mouth is backed by anything." The yard went still in a different way now, because there is a difference between mocking someone and challenging them, and everyone standing there felt the line get crossed. Sergeant Bell hesitated. He looked at Emily and he looked at the general, and he did the only thing a man in his position could do. He obeyed. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "you don't have to do this." Emily looked at him with something almost like warmth. "I know," she said. "Nobody ever has to, that's the point." And then she turned to the rack and she chose a rifle, and the way she chose it was the second clue. She did not grab the nearest one. She did not take the newest or the cleanest. She ran her eyes down the row and she picked the one nobody wanted, the older platform with the heavier barrel and the worn stock, the one the candidates avoided because it was harder to shoot well. Jake noticed. Jake noticed because Jake was smart, and smart people notice when the story stops making sense. "That's the junk gun," he said before he could stop himself. "Nobody shoots that one." "I know," Emily said again, and she said it the way you would answer a child who has just told you something you learned 20 years ago. She carried the rifle to the line. She did not sling it over her shoulder for show. She carried it low and close, muzzle controlled, the way you carry a weapon when carrying weapons stopped being impressive a long time ago and became something closer to breathing. And General Holloway watched her walk, and for the first time, a small, uncomfortable question began to form behind his eyes. But he crushed it, because a man like Holloway would rather be wrong loudly than right quietly. "Standard qualification," he announced to the yard back in control, back in performance. 300 yards, standing. We'll see what the maintenance staff can do." He turned to his aide. "Set the target. 300 yards standing with a coal barrel and an unfamiliar rifle is not an easy shot. It is not a superhuman shot either, but it is the kind of shot that separates people who talk from people who do. Jake Morrison could make it maybe 7 times out of 10. Most of the candidates could not make it at all under pressure, and pressure was exactly what this was. Emily knelt. She did not need to kneel. She could have shot it standing the way the general demanded, but she knelt first for a moment, and she pressed one hand flat against the ground, and she closed her eyes. Sergeant Bell thought she was praying. She was not. She was listening. She was feeling the wind on the back of her hand, reading the temperature of the air against her skin, doing in 3 seconds what most shooters do with instruments and charts. Because there had been years of her life when instruments were a luxury she did not have, and the only computer she could trust was the one behind her own eyes. "Any day now," Holloway said. Emily opened her eyes. She stood. She raised the rifle. And here is the thing that nobody in that yard ever forgot. She did not aim the way they teach you to aim. She did not settle and wobble and correct and settle again the way even good shooters do. The rifle came up and it simply stopped, dead level locked, as if the woman holding it had turned to stone from the shoulders down. There was no drift. There was no tremble. There was only that terrible, beautiful stillness, and every single person watching felt the temperature of the moment change. Jake stopped, breathing. She fired. The sound cracked across the yard and rolled off into the empty distance, and for one full second, nobody moved because a shot at 300 yards does not tell you anything until someone confirms the hit. The aide lifted his spotting scope. He looked. He looked longer than he needed to. Then he lowered the scope, and his face had gone a little pale. "Center mass, sir," he said. "Dead center." Holloway's smile flickered. "Lucky." "Then I'll do it again," Emily said. And before he could answer, she raised the rifle a second time, and again came that impossible stillness. And again she fired, and again the aide looked, and this time when he lowered the scope, his voice was very quiet. "Same hole, sir." She put the second round through the first. The yard erupted, not in cheers because you do not cheer something like that, in something closer to silence with a heartbeat inside it. Trainees were looking at each other. Sergeant Bell had one hand over his mouth, and Jake Morrison stood there with every certainty he had ever owned draining out of him, like water through open fingers, because he had just watched a woman he had laughed at do something he had never seen any human being do, not once, not in all his training. But it was not the shooting that changed everything. Remember that. It was not the shooting. Because General Marcus Holloway, humiliated now, in front of the entire yard, did the thing that arrogant men always do at exactly the wrong moment. Instead of stopping, instead of accepting, instead of showing 1 ounce of the humility the moment demanded, he walked toward her. He walked toward her fast, his face red, his pride bleeding, and he reached out and grabbed her equipment bag off the bench, the one she kept beside her at all times, and he swung it up between them, like evidence in a trial. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" he demanded. "Who trained you? A stunt like that doesn't come from cleaning rifles." I want to know who you really are right now in front of these men, because I think you've been lying about who you are since the day you walked onto my base. And that was the moment everything broke open, because when he grabbed the bag, something on it caught the light. A small metal emblem, worn smooth by years of handling, sewn onto the outside, where a person would put a thing they could not bear to hide and could not bear to explain. Most people would have looked right past it. Holloway looked right past it. He was too angry to see. But there was a man in that yard who did not look past it. A man who had just arrived quiet at the edge of the crowd. Commander Daniel Reeves. He had come to observe the evaluation like Holloway, but Reeves was a different kind of officer, the kind who watched more than he spoke, and he had been watching this entire scene unfold with a growing tightness in his chest that he could not name. He had felt something familiar in the way the woman moved. He had felt it and dismissed it and felt it again. And now, as the general held up that bag in the sunlight, Commander Reeves saw the emblem. And Commander Daniel Reeves went absolutely white. The color left his face the way it leaves a man's face when he sees something the dead are not supposed to leave behind. His lips parted, his hand resting at his side closed slowly into a fist and then opened again. And he took one step forward and then another, and the crowd parted for him without understanding why, because everyone could feel that something enormous was about to happen, even if nobody knew what it was. General, Reeves said. His voice was strange. It was too calm, the way a man's voice goes too calm when he is trying very hard not to let it shake. Put the bag down. Holloway turned, still holding it. Commander, this doesn't concern you. This woman has been... Put it down, Reeves said again, and this time there was steel underneath the calm, and Holloway, for the first time all day, actually hesitated. Reeves walked past him. He walked to Emily, and the entire yard watched the second most powerful man on that field stop in front of the woman they had all just laughed at and stand very still and look at the small metal emblem on her bag as if he were looking at a ghost. Where did you get that symbol? He asked. His voice had dropped almost to a whisper. Emily looked at him, and for the first time all day, something moved behind her eyes, not fear, not pride, something older and heavier, something that had been buried for a very long time and did not want to come up. You know where I got it, she said quietly. You wouldn't be asking if you didn't already know. The two of them stood there, and the whole world seemed to hold its breath around them, and Jake Morrison, watching from 10 feet away, felt the ground of his entire understanding shift beneath him. Because the way the commander was looking at her was not the way you look at a technician. It was the way you look at a legend you thought was gone. It can't be you, Reeves said. His voice cracked on the last word. They told us you were gone. They sealed the whole file. They took your name out of every database in the country. I filed a request myself 3 years ago, and they told me the record didn't exist. They told me you didn't exist. That was the point, Emily said. General Holloway stood forgotten behind them now, the bag still in his hand, his mouth slightly open, watching a scene he did not understand and could not control, which for a man like Holloway was a special kind of torture. Somebody explain what is happening on my range, he demanded, but nobody answered him. Nobody was listening to him anymore. The center of gravity in that yard had moved completely and permanently away from the loud man with the stars on his collar and toward the quiet woman with the worn emblem, and everyone could feel it. Commander Reeves turned to face the crowd, and what he did next, he did slowly, deliberately, like a man performing a sacred duty he had waited years for the chance to perform. All of you, he said, everyone standing here, everyone who laughed, I want you to look at this woman and I want you to understand something, because most of you will go your entire lives and never stand this close to a person like her again. He paused, his jaw was tight, and when he spoke again, his voice carried across that yard like a bell. 9 years ago, this country had a sniper. Not a good sniper, not a great sniper. The best long-range shooter this military has produced in a generation, maybe longer. She operated in a unit so classified that most generals never learned it existed. He glanced back at Holloway when he said the word generals, and Holloway flinched. She did things that don't get talked about because the men whose lives she saved aren't allowed to say her name. And then at the height of it, at the very top, when they were ready to make her into a legend, she disappeared. No medals, no ceremony, nothing. The file was sealed and the name was erased, and every one of us who knew her was told to forget she was ever real. He turned back to Emily. They called her Iron Wolf. The name landed on that yard like a stone dropped into still water, and the silence afterward was absolute, because even the youngest trainee there had heard that name. It was the kind of name that gets whispered in barracks and passed around like a myth, the kind of name attached to stories so impossible that everyone assumes they are exaggerated, a shooter who held a position for 30 hours in a whiteout, a single operator who cleared an escape route for a trapped team when there was no route to clear. A ghost story, a legend, a thing that soldiers tell each other to feel like the world contains something more than fear. And now they were being told that Ghost was real, and she had been kneeling on their range all week, zeroing their scopes, and they had shoved her rifle across the floor with a boot and laughed while they did it. Jake Morrison felt sick. He actually felt sick, a hot wave of shame rising up from his stomach into his throat because he remembered every word he had said, every joke, every grin thrown to the crowd, and he understood now that he had done it to the one person in that entire yard who had earned the right to laugh at all of them, and had chosen instead to stay silent and let them keep their pride. That's not possible, someone muttered. Iron Wolf isn't a real person. That's a made-up name. That's a training story. Emily finally spoke, and when she did not speak like a legend. She spoke like a tired woman who had spent a long time trying to leave something behind and had just watched it catch up to her anyway. It's a real name, she said. I know because I've spent 9 years trying to stop being the person who wore it. She reached out and gently, without any drama, she took her bag back from General Holloway's hand. He let it go. He had no choice. His fingers simply opened because there is a kind of authority that ranks and stars cannot touch, and he had just watched it walk into his yard wearing a plain gray jacket. You want to know who trained me, General, Emily said, and she looked at him, now really looked at him, and there was no anger in it, which was somehow worse than anger. Nobody trained me to be Iron Wolf. I trained me. 30 hours in a position alone with no food and no relief and no guarantee anyone was coming. That isn't something they teach. That's something you survive, and if you're lucky, part of you comes back. Part of me didn't, so I stopped. I walked away. I put down the rifle and I took a job cleaning other people's rifles in the middle of the desert where nobody knew my name, and for 3 years it worked. Sorry, nobody knew until you kicked my case across the floor and decided the quiet woman was worth humiliating in front of your men. Holloway's mouth worked, but no words came out. Because there is no answer to that. There is no way to be right after that. I didn't ask for this, Emily continued quieter now. I didn't come here to prove anything. I don't need to prove anything. I proved everything I ever needed to prove in places you'll never read about to people who are alive today because I stayed in a position past the point where staying made any sense. I came here to be nobody. That was the whole plan. Be nobody. Fix the rifles. Go home. Her voice caught just slightly on the word home, and Reeves noticed it and filed it away because it would matter later in ways none of them could yet see. But you couldn't let me be nobody, could you? The general said nothing, and Commander Reeves, watching the two of them, felt the weight of a decision settling onto his shoulders that he did not want and could not avoid. Because he had come to the Mojave with more than an evaluation to run. He had come with a folder in his briefcase that he had not told anyone about, a folder with a red border and a thread inside it that had been keeping him awake for 2 weeks, and he had come, though he had not admitted it even to himself, half hoping the rumors he had heard were true. The rumors that Iron Wolf was not dead, the rumors that she was hiding somewhere in the desert cleaning rifles waiting. He had not believed them. Right up until the moment he saw the emblem, he had not let himself believe them. Now he believed. Emily, he said, and it was the first time he had used her name, and something in the way he said it made her whole body go still, because she knew that tone. She had heard it before years ago from other officers and other places right before everything in her life changed. I need to talk to you, privately, not about the past. Their eyes met, and in that instant, both of them understood. She understood what was coming, and he understood that she understood, and neither of them said it out loud because the yard was full of trainees, and there are things you do not say in front of children who still believe the world is simple. No, Emily said softly. Whatever it is, no. You don't know what I'm going to ask. I know exactly what you're going to ask, she said. You're going to ask me to pick it back up. The rifle, the name, all of it. You've got that look. I've seen that look before. It's the look men get right before they ask a person to give up everything they've built to save something that isn't theirs to lose. She shook her head slowly. The answer is no, Daniel. I have a life now. It's small and it's quiet and it's mine, and I fought harder for it than I ever fought for any of the missions in that sealed file. I'm not going back. I haven't asked you anything yet. You don't have to. But even as she said it, even as she meant it with every part of the self she had spent 9 years rebuilding some old instinct deep in her chest, the same instinct that had once kept her motionless in a snowbank for 30 hours was already stirring awake, because she had seen the folder under his arm. She had seen the red border, and she knew what a red border meant. It meant people were going to die, and someone in a room somewhere had already decided that Iron Wolf was the only one who could stop it. She just did not know yet how right they were. General Holloway finally found his voice, and to his small credit, it had lost every ounce of its earlier cruelty. "Commander," he said quietly, "what's in the folder?" Reeves did not answer him. He kept his eyes on Emily. 3 days, he said. That's all I'm asking you to hear me out on. 3 days. If you say no after that, I'll walk out of your life and I'll bury your name again myself so deep nobody will ever dig it up. I'll do that for you, but you have to hear it first. Because if you don't, and it happens, and it could have been stopped, you're going to carry that too. And I don't think you have room. I think you're already carrying all you can hold. That last part hit her like a physical blow because it was true and because he had no right to know it was true, and because the fact that he knew meant he understood her better than almost anyone left alive. Emily Carter closed her eyes. And in the silence of that yard with 40 trainees holding their breath, and a humbled general standing forgotten, and a young man named Jake Morrison drowning in his own shame, the woman they called Iron Wolf stood very still, the way she had learned to stand still in the worst moments of her life and tried to hold on to the small, quiet, ordinary life she had built out of the wreckage of the extraordinary one. She was still trying to hold on to it when Commander Reeves reached into his briefcase and pulled out the folder with the red border and set it down on the bench beside her rifle. "Just open it," he said. "That's all. Just open it and then decide." Emily looked down at the folder. She did not touch it, not yet. But her hand, the same hand that had put 2 rounds through a single hole at 300 yards, was trembling now just slightly in a way it had not trembled all day. And every person watching understood that whatever was inside that red border was heavier than any rifle, and that the quiet woman they had underestimated was standing at the edge of a choice that would cost her something no matter which way she chose. She reached for it. Her fingers touched the corner, and Commander Reeves said the words that made her stop breathing. "It's the same mountain," he said. "Emily, it's the same team. It's happening again." The same mountain. Some team. Those 5 words did something to Emily Carter that 9 years of silence had not been able to do. They took the air out of her lungs. She pulled her hand back from the folder like it had burned her. "No," she said. "That's not possible. That team came home. I brought that team home. Every single one of them walked off that mountain alive. I counted them. I counted them twice." "I know you did," Reeves said quietly. "It's in the report." "Yeah, my bad. The part of the report they didn't seal. You held that position until all 11 of them were clear, and then you held it another 6 hours to cover their extraction. 11 men, Emily. You saved 11 men on that mountain." "Then what are you talking about?" "The same team, the same mountain. None of that makes sense unless—" She stopped. Her face changed. Something cold moved behind her eyes. "Unless someone went back." Reeves said nothing, and his silence was the answer. "Someone went back to that mountain," she said slowly, working it out loud, the way she used to work out a shot one factor at a time. "Why would anyone go back to that mountain? There's nothing there. It's a rock in the middle of nowhere. There's no strategic value. There's no reason to be within 200 miles of it unless—" And then the second piece landed, and her voice dropped to almost nothing. "Unless they're not going back for the mountain. They're going back for the people who were on it." "Open the folder," Reeves said. She opened the folder. For a long moment she did not speak. Her eyes moved down the page, and the trainees watching could see her face go through something, could see the woman who had been so perfectly, terribly calm all day begin to lose her grip on that calm 1 degree at a time. Whatever was on that page, it was worse than anything they could have guessed. "This is a kill list," she finally said. Her voice was flat and hollow. "This is a list of the men from that mountain. Somebody made a list of the men I saved, and somebody is going down the list one at a time. She looked up. How many? 3 so far, Reeves said. In the last 5 weeks, 2 were made to look like accidents. The third one they didn't bother. The third one was a message. Who's left? 8. 8 of the original 11 are still alive. For now. General Holloway, who had been standing in stunned silence this whole time, finally spoke, and his voice had none of the swagger left in it. Commander, if this is real, if American operators are being hunted on our own soil, this goes to the top. This goes to Central Command. This isn't a job for one. It went to the top, Reeves said, cutting him off. That's the problem, General. It went to the top 5 weeks ago, and 2 operators died while it was sitting on a desk at the top, and a third died while a task force was being assembled. The system is too slow. Whoever is doing this knows exactly how the system works, and they're staying 3 steps ahead of it because they know how long it takes for men like us to get permission to move. He turned back to Emily. That's why I'm here. Not with a task force. With one person who doesn't need permission and doesn't move at the speed of paperwork. Emily set the folder down on the bench. Her hands were steady again. That more than anything is what Reeves noticed. The trembling was gone. The moment she understood there were lives on the line, the fear had simply left her body, replaced by something older and colder and far more focused. He had seen it happen to her once before years ago, and it had frightened him then, and it frightened him now because it meant Iron Wolf was already back, whether Emily Carter had agreed to it or not. There's something you're not telling me, she said. You wouldn't come all the way out here. You wouldn't risk digging up a name the government spent 9 years burying unless there was something about this that made me the only option. So tell me the part you're saving. Tell me why it has to be me. Reeves was quiet for a moment. Then he said, because whoever is doing this knows things they shouldn't know. They knew where 2 of those operators lived under changed names. They knew the security routine at a third one's home. They have the sealed file, Emily, not pieces of it. All of it. Every name, every location, every detail. There are maybe 6 people alive with that level of access, and I've personally verified where 5 of them are. He paused. The 6th one I can't find. The 6th one went off the grid 3 months ago, and the 6th one is the officer who ran your unit. The name did not need to be said. Emily's whole body went rigid, and for the first time all day, the trainees saw something on her face that looked like real fear. The kind of fear that only comes from a place that was supposed to be safe. Colonel Voss, she whispered. Colonel Aaron Voss, Reeves confirmed. Your commanding officer. The man who built your unit. The man who sealed your file. The man who knows more about every operator on that mountain than any human being alive, because he's the one who put them there in the first place. That's not possible, Emily said. But even as she said it, her voice had lost its certainty. Voss wouldn't. He protected us. He fought the brass to keep our identities buried. He was the one who let me walk away. He signed the papers himself. He told me to go build a life and never look back. Why would he? I don't know why, Reeves said. I don't know if it's him. I only know he's gone, and the killing started 3 weeks after he disappeared, and whoever's doing this has everything Voss had. Maybe he's a victim too. Maybe he's the next name on the list, and he ran to save himself. Or maybe he didn't finish it. He didn't have to. Emily turned away from all of them. She walked a few steps toward the edge of the range, toward the empty desert, and she stood there with her back to the yard for a long time, and nobody dared to break the silence. Jake Morrison, who had spent the whole day watching his entire understanding of the world come apart, watched her stand there and understood that he was seeing something private. A woman standing at the exact moment where a life she had built and a life she had buried were fighting over her, and only one of them was going to win. When she turned back round, they could all see which one had won. I need everything, she said, and her voice had changed. It was crisp now, economical, the voice of someone who had stopped being a maintenance technician somewhere in the last 60 seconds and had become something else entirely. I need the full file on all 3 killings. I need the current locations and cover identities of the 8 surviving operators. I need to know which one is the most exposed, because that's the next name. And if we're going to get ahead of this, we get ahead of it there. She looked at Reeves. And I need to know what you already tried, so I don't waste time trying it again. Reeves let out a slow breath, and something in his shoulders eased because he had gotten his answer, and it was the answer he had crossed a country hoping for and dreading in equal measure. So that's a yes. That's a not yet, Emily said. That's a I'll look. I haven't picked up anything. I'm still just a woman who cleans rifles. Don't put the name on me until I put it on myself. But they both knew. Everyone in that yard knew. The name was already back. General Holloway cleared his throat. When they turned to him, the change in him was almost unsettling. The arrogance was gone so completely, it was hard to believe it had ever been there. Whatever you need from this facility, he said. Equipment range time of secure room transport. It's yours. I'll authorize it personally. He hesitated, and then he did something none of them expected. He looked directly at Emily and he said, "And I owe you an apology, not for doubting your skill. I've been proven wrong about skill before. I owe you an apology for the boot, for the case, for deciding you were nothing because you were quiet. That was small of me, and I've been in this uniform long enough to know better." Emily looked at him for a moment. "Apology accepted, General, but do me a favor and remember the feeling. Because the next quiet person you underestimate might be someone whose life depends on you seeing them clearly." Holloway nodded slowly, and something passed between them, and it was not friendship, but it was something. Respect, maybe. The hard kind that has to be earned in front of a crowd. They moved to a secure room inside the facility within the hour, and it was there spreading the files across a table under fluorescent light that Emily Carter began to disappear and Iron Wolf began to return in earnest. Reeves watched it happen. He watched her read, and he watched the way she read, the way her eyes moved not front to back, but jumping, pulling threads, connecting things across 3 separate documents that the analysts back at command had treated as unrelated. "These two," she said, tapping 2 of the killings. "They weren't first choices. Look at the timeline. These 2 operators lived close to each other 2 states over. Whoever did this went after them together because it was efficient, not because they were the highest priority. Which means the priorities are somewhere else on the list." She pulled the roster of the 8 survivors toward her. "So who's the real target? Who's the one they're saving for last?" "Why would they save anyone for last?" "Because killers who make lists always have a favorite," she said, and the flatness of the way she said it made Reeves cold. "There's always one name on the list that matters more than the others. The rest are just the ones you get through to reach that one. You go after the easy ones first, build momentum, learn the pattern, and you save the one that matters until you're good at it." She looked up at him. "So which of these 8 men matters more than the others? Which one, if he died, would hurt the most?" Reeves stared at her, and then slowly the blood drained out of his face for the second time that day, because he suddenly understood something he should have understood weeks ago. "Emily," he said carefully, "you're not on this list." She frowned. "I know I'm not on the list. I wasn't part of the team. I was the Overwatch. I was a mile away on a ridge. Half those men never even saw my face." "That's exactly what I mean," Reeves said. "Whoever made this list has the full sealed file. The full file, Emily. It has you in it. It has Iron Wolf in it. You're the most valuable name in that entire operation, the crown jewel, the one asset the whole thing was built around. If someone wanted to erase that mountain, if someone wanted to hunt down everyone connected to what happened up there, you would be the first name on the list, not the missing one." He leaned forward. "So why aren't you on it? Why would someone with the complete file leave off the single most important person?" Emily went very still, and then quietly she said the thing that neither of them wanted to say. "Because they don't need to hunt me. They already know where I am." The silence in that room was total. 3 years I've been in this desert," she said, and her voice had gone soft and dangerous. 3 years off every grid under a name that isn't mine in a job nobody would look at twice. And you found me in 2 weeks, Daniel, because someone whispered a rumor in your ear. So ask yourself, if the rumor reached you, who else did it reach? And if whoever is doing this already knows where Iron Wolf is and hasn't come for her, then I'm not a target." She looked at him. "I'm bait, or I'm the ending. I'm the last name on their list, and they left me off the paper because they don't want anyone protecting me before they're ready." Reeves opened his mouth to argue and then closed it because he could not find the flaw in it. It fit too well, and it meant that the moment he had walked onto this base and spoken her old name out loud in front of 40 people, he might have started a clock he could not stop. "Then we've already been seen," he said hoarsely, "by coming here, by me saying it out loud. If someone's watching you, then someone knows Iron Wolf just picked up a red folder," Emily finished, "which changes their timeline. which means whoever was next on that list just got moved up because now they have to move before we can organize. She was already standing, already pulling the roster toward her, already scanning. So we don't have days. We might not have hours. Which of these 8 is the most exposed right now tonight? Give me the name. Reeves pulled the file. His hands were not quite steady. There's one, Master Chief Ray Delgado. He was the team leader on the mountain. He's the one who actually led those 11 men. He lives alone now upstate under the name Ray Doyle. He refused witness protection, said he'd rather live as himself than die as somebody else. Reeves swallowed. He's the most exposed man on the list. No security, no cover team, just an old operator on a piece of land who thinks the war is over. He led the team I saved, Emily said quietly. He's the one that matters. He's the favorite. He's the one they're saving for last. She was already moving toward the door. We're out of time. If I'm right about the timeline, they're not saving him for last anymore. They moved him to the front the second you said my name in that yard. How far is upstate? 6 hours by air. But Emily, we can't just, how far by air, Daniel? I can have a transport in the air in 40 minutes, Holloway said from the doorway. He had been listening. I told you, whatever you need, it's yours. Emily stopped at the door and turned back to look at both of them, and for the first time since Reeves had shown up, there was something in her face that was not fear and was not grief. It was purpose, and terrible, familiar, unwanted purpose, the thing she had spent 9 years trying to unlearn, and it had come back the moment she understood that a man who trusted her, a man she had bled to save, was about to die because someone found out she was still alive. Get the transport in the air, she said. I'm going to go get my rifle. Which one? Reeves asked. We'll requisition anything you. The junk gun, Emily said. The one nobody wanted. It shoots better than any of them, and everyone here just watched me prove it, which means nobody will think twice about a maintenance tech carrying her own equipment. Small profile. That's how we move. And there it was, Reeves thought, the mind that had made her a legend, thinking 3 moves ahead about something as small as which weapon would draw the least attention, while she was already thinking 6 moves ahead about the man they were flying to save. She was gone before he could answer. They were in the air in 38 minutes, and it was somewhere over the dark middle of the country with the engines humming and the lights low that Reeves finally asked her the question he had been holding since the yard. Why'd you really let me talk you into this? You could have said no. You almost did say no. What changed? Emily was quiet for a while, looking out at nothing. Then she said, You said his name, Delgado. You didn't know you'd said it. You just listed it with the others. But I heard it. She was silent again. On that mountain on the second day, I was almost done. 30 hours, no sleep, no food. The cold had gotten into me so deep I couldn't feel my trigger finger anymore. And I remember thinking very calmly that I was going to die up there, and the team was going to die with me because I couldn't hold the position anymore. She turned to look at him, and then Delgado's voice came over the radio. He didn't know how bad I was. He just said, real quiet, Iron Wolf, whatever you're doing up there, you're the only reason any of us still has a heartbeat, and I want you to know we know it. And then he went off the air because he had wounded men to move. She looked back out the window. I held the position 11 more hours after that. Because of 9 words from a man who took the time to tell a sniper he'd never met that she mattered, while he was busy trying to keep his own men alive. Her jaw tightened. So no, when you say his name, I don't get to say no. I owe that man 11 hours of my life. I'm not going to sit in a desert cleaning rifles while somebody crosses him off a list. Reeves didn't say anything for a moment. Then quietly, he's going to be glad to see you. He's going to be furious to see me, Emily said, and something that was almost a smile touched the corner of her mouth for the first time all day. He told me to disappear. He was there the day I walked away. He shook my hand and he said, Wolf, don't you ever let this life pull you back in. You did your part. Go live. The almost smile faded. And now here I come back from the dead to tell him the life pulled us both back in. He's going to be so angry. A pause. Right up until I tell him someone's coming to kill him, then he'll be Delgado again. Then he'll be ready. They landed at a small airfield in the gray hour before dawn, and Reeves had a vehicle waiting and Emily changed in the back of it, not into anything tactical, just into ordinary clothes, a jacket, a cap, The kind of thing a woman driving a truck up a rural road, at dawn would wear, because she was already thinking about how they looked from a distance, already thinking like someone who assumed she was being watched. Reeves noticed she had loaded the rifle into a plain hard case, the kind a hunter would carry, nothing to draw an eye. "How far to Delgado's place?" she asked. 40 minutes, it's remote. That's why he picked it. One road in. One road in, Emily repeated and her voice sharpened. "Say that again." "One road in. He's at the top of a hill end of a private drive, no other way to—" "Stop the car," Emily said. "What?" "Stop the car, Daniel, right now." He stopped the car. She was already out, already scanning the terrain around them in the growing light, already reading the ground, the way she read wind and distance, and Reeves watched her do it and felt the fear crawl back up his spine because he had learned a long time ago that when Iron Wolf suddenly went quiet and started reading the ground, it meant she had seen something the rest of the world was going to see about 10 seconds too late. "One road in means one road in for us," she said. "It also means anyone who wants Delgado has exactly one place they have to be to get him. And if they moved him up the less because of what happened in that yard yesterday, then they've had almost 24 hours to get into position." She turned in a slow circle, and her eyes settled on the high ground. To the east, the ridgeline that overlooked the only road up to Delgado's hill, and she went very still. "If I were going to kill that man, I wouldn't do it at his house. Too many variables. I'd do it on the road. I'd take the high ground, over the one road in, and I'd wait for him to drive down some morning, and I'd take him at distance where he'd never even hear it coming." Her voice dropped. "The way I would do it. The way someone with the full foe would know I would do it." Reeves felt his blood go cold. "You think there's a shooter up there, right now, on that ridge?" "I think," Emily said slowly, "that if someone wanted to hunt down every person connected to that mountain, and if that someone had access to everything, including 9 years of study on exactly how Iron Wolf operates, then they wouldn't just be copying me. They'd be baiting me. They'd know that the moment they went after Delgado, if I was still alive, I'd come. And they'd set up the one shot they'd need on the one road in, and they'd wait for both of us to drive right into it." She looked at Reeves, and her face was pale and certain. "We're not early, Daniel. That's what's wrong. We rushed here thinking we might be too late to save him. But look around. It's quiet. Delgado's still up there, still alive, still driving down this road every morning like clockwork. We're not too late." Her voice dropped to almost nothing. "We're exactly on time. We're driving straight into the kill zone they built for us, and whoever's up on that ridge has been watching us since we stopped the car." She dropped flat behind the vehicle half a second before the first round came in and blew out the front tire, and the sound of the shot rolled down from the ridge. A full beat later, a heavy, familiar professional sound, and Emily Carter pressed herself against the cold metal and looked at the case that held the junk gun 6 feet away in the open, and understood that the next few seconds were going to decide whether the man on that hill lived or died, and whether she ever got to go home again at all. 6 feet? The case was 6 feet away in the open, and 6 feet when a professional with the high ground has already ranged your position is a very long way to travel. "Don't move," Emily said. She said it low and flat, and Reeves, pressed against the vehicle beside her, with his heart hammering, understood that she was not talking to him out of panic. She was talking to him out of arithmetic. "He put that first round through the tire, not through us. That wasn't a miss. That was a choice." "What do you mean a choice? He shot at us?" "He shot at the tire," Emily said. "He wanted us stopped, not dead, not yet. If he'd wanted us dead, you'd already be dead, Daniel, because you stood in the open for 4 seconds after I told you to stop the car, and any shooter worth putting on that ridge would have taken you in the first 2. Her eyes were moving, tracking reading angles off the vehicle, the road, the light. "He's not here to kill us. He's here to hold us. He wants us pinned down here on this road while somebody else finishes the real job up the hill." Her face went hard. "Delgado, this isn't the kill zone. This is the leash. They're keeping us off the hill while another shooter takes Delgado at the house." Reeves felt the ground drop out from under him. "Then we have to move. We have to get up there." "If you stand up, you die," Emily said. "That's the whole trap. He's got us in a box. Move and he kills us. Stay and Delgado dies. Somebody built this to make us choose." She was quiet for exactly 1 second, and Reeves would remember later that it was only 1 second, that in the space of a single breath, The woman beside him solved a problem that would have paralyzed most men for the rest of their lives. So we don't choose, we take the box apart. How? I need 3 seconds of his attention on you, she said. Not you standing up. You, your voice. When I move, you shout, anything. Curse at the ridge, scream, throw a rock. I don't care, just pull his eye toward this end of the vehicle for 3 seconds. She was already gathering herself, already coiling, and Reeves saw the technician disappear completely, saw the last of Emily Carter fold away, and something leaner and older take her place. The case is 6 feet. I can cover 6 feet in under 2 seconds if I stay low. But the second I move, he'll track. So I need his focus split. 3 seconds, Daniel, on my go. Emily, if you're wrong about him wanting us alive, then I made a mistake, she said simply, and I made it fast, which is the only kind worth making. On 3. 1. This is insane. 2. Emily, 3. Reeves shouted. He didn't even know what he shouted. It came out as a raw, furious bellow toward the ridge. And in the same instant, Emily was moving low and flat and impossibly fast, not running so much as pouring herself across the open ground. And she hit the case sliding and had it open before her body stopped. And the round that came screaming in a half-second late chewed into the dirt exactly where her center of mass would have been if she had run upright like a normal, frightened human being. She heard it hit. She noted the direction. She was already assembling the picture. The shot had come high and from the left of where she'd expected, which told her the shooter had repositioned, which told her he was disciplined, which told her he was exactly as good as she'd feared. She did not shoot back. That was the thing Reeves never forgot. She had the rifle in her hands. She had a hostile shooter on the ridge, and she did not fire because she had nothing to fire at yet. And Iron Wolf did not waste rounds announcing her presence to a professional. Instead, she pressed herself into the low ground behind the engine block, the one place on that whole road where the ridge shooter's angle could not reach her. And she went still, and she started to hunt. Talk to me about Delgado's house, she said, calm as still water. You've seen the layout. How's it sit? Top of the hill, cleared ground around it. He keeps it cleared himself so nobody can approach unseen. Cleared ground, Emily repeated, and something flickered across her face. How cleared? 100 yards in every direction. He cut it all down years ago, said an old habit. And Emily Carter, pinned on a road with a sniper on the ridge above her, actually let out a breath that was almost relief. Then Delgado's not dead yet. He's not going to be easy. 100 yards of cleared ground around an old operator who cut it himself means Delgado built a killing field around his own house and then went and lived in the middle of it. Nobody's walking up that hill, which means the only way to get him is the same way they'd get me, at distance, from high ground. Her eyes moved. So there's a second shooter, and that second shooter needs elevation and a clear line to the house, and there's only one piece of ground around here that gives you both. She was already looking at it, the same ridge, higher up, further along where the spine of the hill rose toward a rock shelf that would look down on both the road and Delgado's cleared hilltop at once. They're not 2 shooters, she said slowly, and the realization landed in her voice like a stone. It's one. One shooter up on that shelf, and he can see the road and the house from the same position. He pinned us with the road shots because we drove into his field of view, and any second now, he's going to shift back to his primary and take Delgado the moment the man steps outside for his morning. Her jaw tightened. One shooter doing the work of 2 because he's good enough to hold 2 kill zones from one position. There's maybe 5 people alive who could do that. She went very still. I trained 2 of them. Reeves heard that, and the cold that went through him had nothing to do with the morning air. Emily, what are you saying? I'm saying whoever's up there doesn't just have the file, she said. I'm saying he moves like someone I taught. The repositioning, the way he pinned instead of killed the discipline, the way he's running 2 zones off one shelf. That's not doctrine, Daniel. That's my doctrine. Somebody up on that ridge learned to shoot the way I shoot, and there are only a handful of people on this earth who could have taught them, and I'm the only one of those who's still... She stopped. Her face changed, and Reeves watched a horror move across it that he had never seen on her before, not even when he'd told her about the kill list. There was one, she whispered. There was one student, before the mountain, before any of it. Voss assigned him to me, a young shooter, the best raw talent I ever saw, and I trained him for 8 months, and then one day Voss pulled him and reassigned him and told me to forget the whole thing, told me it was classified above my level and I never saw him again. Her hands were tight on the rifle. I asked once, "What happened to my student?" And Voss looked at me and said that program didn't work out, and something in his face told me to never ask again. So I never did. She looked up toward the ridge, toward the shooter she could not yet see. But I remember how he shot Daniel. I remember it because I'm the one who taught him. And whoever's up on that shelf shoots exactly like the student I lost. The radio in Reeves's jacket crackled. A voice came through, thin and dry and unhurried, and Reeves felt Emily go rigid beside him because it was coming through on a frequency that should have been secure on a channel only a handful of people could possibly have access to. "Iron Wolf," the voice said. "I was hoping the rumor was true. Stay down there behind the truck. You've got maybe 4 minutes before the old man comes out for his coffee, and I'd hate for you to miss it." Emily closed her eyes for 1 second. When she opened them, she said one word quietly, and it was not a question. "Cole." There was a pause on the radio, and then softly, almost warmly, "You remember, I wondered if you would. It's been a long time, teacher." Reeves stared at her. "You know him?" "I made him," Emily said, and her voice had gone to a place Reeves had never heard, hollowed out, the sound of a person looking at the worst thing they ever did. "Daniel Cole, my student, the one Voss took. 8 months I taught him everything I knew, every trick, every read, every way I'd learned to make a shot nobody else could make. And then they took him, and they told me the program failed." Her eyes came up. "It didn't fail. They didn't shut it down. They finished it. They turned my student into exactly what they wanted, and then they pointed him at the men from the mountain, and now he's up on that ridge about to kill Ray Delgado with the skills I put in his hands." "Very good, teacher," Cole's voice said through the radio, and there was something under the calm now, something that had been waiting 9 years to be heard. "You always were the fastest read in the unit, so let me save you the trouble of the next part since we don't have much time. Yes, it's me. Yes, I'm the one who's been crossing off the list, and no, Voss didn't send me." A pause. "Voss is the reason I'm doing this." Emily's whole body went still. "What did you do to Voss?" "I didn't do anything to Voss," Cole said. "Voss is the one who threw me away. You want to know what the program was, teacher, the one that didn't work out. It was a program to build a shooter with no name and no file, a ghost even the ghost wouldn't know about. And when they were done building me, when I'd done the jobs they needed a nameless man to do. They were supposed to bring me home. Voss promised me they'd bring me home." His voice never rose, and that was the terrible part. It stayed level and quiet the whole time, the voice of a man who had run out of feelings a long time ago. "They didn't bring me home. They left me out there. 4 years, teacher. 4 years on my own doing wet work for men who'd already erased me, and when I finally came back, Voss looked me in the eye and told me the man I used to be was dead, and I should go be dead somewhere quiet. Same thing he told you, except you got a life out of it. I got nothing." "So this is revenge," Reeves said into the radio before Emily could stop him. "You're killing the men from the mountain because you're angry at Voss. Those men didn't do anything to you." "Who's that?" Cole said. "That the Commander Reeves. I've read your file too." A beat. "You think this is revenge? It's not revenge, Commander. Revenge would be killing Voss, and I could kill Voss anytime I want. I know exactly where he's hiding. This is something else. This is me proving a point. They built a program to make a perfect ghost, and then they decided the program was too dangerous, too effective, and they buried it. They buried me, and they buried the records, and they told themselves it never happened. So I'm unburying it. Every man on that mountain is proof that the program worked. Every one of them is alive because Iron Wolf held that ridge, and Iron Wolf trained the man they threw away, and I'm going to keep going down the list until somebody with stars on their collar has to stand up in a room and say the words out loud. The program was real. We made a monster, and then we abandoned him." His voice dropped. "You want to stop me, teacher? Come up the hill. But the old man dies first. That's not negotiable. Delgado led the team. Delgado's the proof. He goes today whether you're watching or not." The radio went dead. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Emily was already checking the rifle, already thinking, and Reeves grabbed her arm. "Emily, if he's as good as you, if you trained him, then going up there is suicide. You'd be walking into his ground against a shooter who learned everything from you. He didn't learn everything from me, Emily said. That's the one thing he got wrong just now. He said I taught him everything I knew. I didn't. She looked at Reeves, and there was something fierce and grieving in her eyes at the same time. You don't teach a student everything. Not a student that good. Not one you're a little afraid of. There's always something you hold back. One read, one trick, the thing you keep in case you ever have to shoot the very person you're teaching. Every real teacher does it and hates themselves for doing it. Her jaw set. I held one thing back from Daniel Cole. 8 months and I gave him everything but one thing. And I have exactly 4 minutes to remember what it was. She moved. She didn't stand, she flowed, keeping the engine block between herself and the shelf, working her way to the front of the vehicle where the ground fell away into a shallow ditch that ran roughly toward the base of the hill. Reeves followed low behind her, and as they moved, she talked fast and clipped, thinking out loud the way she used to before a shot. He's got the high ground, and he's got 2 kill zones to watch, which means his attention is divided even if he's good enough to split it. He wants Delgado. That's his primary, we're just the leash. Which means the second Delgado steps out that door, Cole's whole focus goes uphill and away from us. That's my window. That's the only window I'm going to get. When Cole commits to Delgado, I move. Move where you can't outshoot him from down here. I'm not going to outshoot him from down here, Emily said. I'm going to get to the one piece of ground he can't watch. He's holding 2 zones from that shelf, the road, and the house, but 2 zones from one position means there's a third direction. He's blind to the dead ground behind and below his own shelf, the approach nobody makes because nobody's supposed to be able to get there without being seen crossing his kill zones first. She almost smiled, and it was not a happy thing. He set up a perfect position to kill 2 targets in the open. He did it exactly the way I'd do it, which means he made exactly the mistake I'd make, the one I never let anybody see me fix because fixing it is the thing I held back. She glanced at Reeves. There's a blind approach to that shelf. I know there is because I know how he set up because I'm the one who taught him how to set up. And I'm the only person alive who knows the way in because I'm the only person alive who knows the flaw. Above them at the top of the hill, a door opened. Both of them froze. And through the thin morning quiet came the ordinary devastating sound of a screen door swinging shut and a man's footsteps on a wooden porch and a low voice rough with age and mourning saying to no one, "Cold one today." Ray Delgado had come out for his coffee. "That's it," Emily breathed. "That's the window. Right now his eye is going uphill. Right now for the next few seconds, Cole isn't watching the road anymore." She looked at Reeves one last time. "Stay here. Keep the truck between you and the shelf. Whatever you hear, do not come up that hill, because if you move in the open, you'll pull his eye back down and Delgado dies, and I die and you die, and the whole thing was for nothing. Can you do that? Can you stay down here and do nothing while it happens up there?" Reeves's throat was tight. "That's the hardest thing you could ask me." "I know," Emily said. "It's the hardest thing anybody ever asked me too, 9 years ago, on a different hill. Hold the position and do nothing but wait while everything in you screams to move." She was already going. "I held it then, hold it now." And then she was gone, out of the ditch and into the dead ground, moving up the flank of the hill along a line that made no sense to Reeves at all, a line that seemed to walk straight through open country, except that Cole's rifle never found her because she was moving through the one seam in his vision that only she knew was there. The flaw she had built into her own doctrine years ago and then refused to teach the student she was a little afraid of. Up top, Delgado took a sip of his coffee, and somewhere on that shelf, a scope settled onto the center of his chest, and Daniel Cole let out the slow breath that comes right before a shot, the breath Emily had taught him, and his finger began to take up the slack on the trigger. And 40 yards below and behind him, climbing through ground, he swore no one could cross. The teacher, who had made him, ran out of time to remember the thing she'd held back because she was suddenly close enough to see him, close enough to see the back of the student she'd lost 9 years ago. And in that instant, it came back to her, all at once, the one trick she never taught, and her blood went cold because she finally understood why she'd held it back. It wasn't a shooting trick at all. It was the answer to a single question, the question every sniper buries so deep, they hope they never have to answer it, and she was about to have to answer it now, 40 yards behind a man she had built with her own hands, with Ray Delgado's life measured in the last half inch of a trigger pull. When the person in your scope is someone you love and the only way to save an innocent life is to take theirs. Are you fast enough, and are you willing, and can you live with your own hands afterward? Delgado lifted the mug again. Cole's finger tightened, and Emily Carter raised the junk gun, settled it against her shoulder with that terrible stillness, put the crosshairs on the back of the student she had lost, and opened her mouth to say his name one last time. Cole. She did not shoot. That was the thing she would turn over in her mind for the rest of her life, the half second where every instinct she owned screamed to pull the trigger and be done with it, and she said his name instead. Because the trick she had held back, the one that came flooding into her at the last second, was not a trick at all. It was a truth she had buried so she'd never have to look at it. A teacher who is faster than her student will always have one shot before he can turn. One free shot given to her by the very training she gave him, because she taught him to trust the position. And trusting the position means never expecting the one person who knows how you built it. She had the free shot. She had it clean, the crosshair steady on the back of his skull, and she could not take it, and understanding why she could not take it was the thing she had hidden from herself for 9 years. You cannot unlove the ones you made. Cole's finger came off the trigger. He did not turn. That was the discipline in him, the thing she'd put there, the refusal to move fast when a slow motion would do. You found the seam, he said, quiet, almost admiring his rifle still trained uphill on Delgado. The blind approach. I always wondered if it was real or if I just wasn't good enough to close it. 9 years I've looked at my own positions and felt a draft I couldn't find. A pause. You held it back. The one thing, you never taught me the flaw in my own doctrine. I held it back so I could stand where I'm standing right now, Emily said. Her voice did not shake. It was the flattest, calmest sound in the world, and it cost her everything to make it. Take your finger off that rifle, Daniel. Take it off and turn around slow and let me see your hands. And I promise you, whatever they did to you, whatever Voss did, whatever they made you into, there's a version of this morning where you walk down that hill breathing. But it ends the second you send a round into that old man. There's no version where you kill Delgado and I let you keep your life. You know that. I trained you to know that. Delgado's a name on a list, Cole said. He's not a person to me. I never met him. He's just proof the program was real. He's the man who told a dying sniper on a frozen ridge that she mattered, Emily said. 9 years ago, when I had nothing left, he got on the radio and he told me the 11 men behind him had heartbeats because of me. And I held that position 11 more hours on 9 words from a stranger. That's who's standing on that porch drinking coffee. Not proof, a man who once saved my life by talking to me. So no Daniel, not him, anybody but him, and we could maybe have talked. Not him. For the first time, something moved in Cole's stillness. A hesitation. Small, but she saw it because she was the one who had taught him to have none. You're stalling, he said. You're trying to make him a person so I can't take the shot. It won't work. I turned that part off a long time ago. They made sure of it. Then take the shot, Emily said. Silence. Take it, she said again softer. You've got him. He's standing in the open, 60 yards, no wind to speak of. It's the easiest shot you'll take all year. So take it. I'm right behind you, Daniel. I've got the back of your head, and you know I won't miss. And you know I'm faster than you because I'm the one who set the ceiling on how fast you'd ever be. You take Delgado, I take you half a second apart, and 2 men die on this hill this morning. Instead of 1. Her voice dropped to almost nothing. So take it. Prove to me you turned that part off. Prove they finished the job on you. Because if you can look at an old man drinking coffee and end him while your teacher watches, then they really did kill the boy I trained, and I'll have nothing to grieve because there'll be nothing left of him to grieve for. The rifle on the shelf did not move. Down at the truck, Reeves crouched in the ditch with his own weapon drawn and useless. No angle, no shot, nothing to do but exactly what she'd asked, the hardest thing, hold the position and wait. And he listened to the silence stretch out on top of that hill and felt every second of it in his chest. You're not turned off, Daniel, Emily said. If you were, he'd already be dead. You've had him for 2 minutes. A turned-off man takes that shot in the first 2 seconds. You didn't. You've been holding and you've been talking, and a man who's really empty inside doesn't need to talk. So put it down. Let me see the boy who used to reload so fast he'd grin about it, the one who called me teacher, like it meant something before they took the meaning out of the word. Don't, Cole said, and his voice cracked just once, just barely, and it was the most human sound he'd made. Don't do that. Don't make me remember. Remembering is the thing they took, and if I start now in the middle of a shot, I'll fall apart. And I can't fall apart. I have to finish. If I don't finish, then it was all for nothing. 4 years for nothing. They threw me away for nothing. They threw you away, Emily said. Yes, they did. Voss lied to you and the men above Voss used you, and then they buried you like something they were ashamed of. And every bit of your rage is earned, Daniel. I'm not going to stand here and tell you it isn't. They wronged you. Bad. Worse than they wronged me, and they wronged me plenty. She took one slow step closer, rifle steady. But Ray Delgado didn't do it. The 11 men on that mountain didn't do it. You know who did it. You said it yourself. You could kill Voss anytime you want. You know exactly where he's hiding. Another step. So here's the thing I can't figure, and I've been chewing on it since the radio. If your fight is with Voss and you can reach Voss whenever you please, then why are you up on a ridge shooting men who never even knew your name? Why go down the list instead of going to the source? A man who really wanted justice would put it on the one who earned it. So why haven't you, Daniel? Why is Voss still breathing? The silence that followed was different. It was not tactical silence. It was the silence of a question landing somewhere it wasn't supposed to reach. Because Cole started and stopped. Because, Emily said gently, killing Voss ends it. And you don't want it to end. Because when it ends, you have to be a person again. And you don't know how anymore. And being a weapon pointed at a list is the only thing that still feels like something. She was close now, close enough to lower her rifle a fraction, and she did, deliberately letting him hear the change in her stance. If he was listening, and he was always listening, she'd taught him that too. I know that feeling, Daniel. I know it better than anyone alive. When they let me walk away, when the war was finally over for me. I stood in the middle of a desert and I did not know who I was without a rifle in my hands. For 3 years, I cleaned other people's weapons because touching a rifle was the only time I felt real. So don't tell me you turned something off. You didn't turn it off. You buried it, same as me, and it's screaming under there, same as mine was. And going down that list is just you feeding it so you don't have to hear it scream. On the porch, Ray Delgado set down his mug. He had gone very still, and in a voice that carried clear and rough across the cleared ground without turning. Without looking, an old operator who had felt eyes on his back for the last 90 seconds and known exactly what kind of eyes they were. Delgado said, "Son, I don't know who you are, but I know that voice down the hill. That's Iron Wolf. And if she's up here vouching that there's a way off this hill for you, then there's a way off this hill for you, because that woman has never once in her life been wrong about a person under fire." He picked the mug back up, slow, deliberate, the calmest man on the mountain. "I'm going to finish my coffee. You do whatever you're going to do, but I'll tell you what I told a room full of scared kids on a ridge 9 years ago. Nobody up here today has to die. That's a choice. It's always a choice, right up until it isn't." And Daniel Cole, who had crossed 3 men off a list without his hands so much as trembling, felt them tremble now. "You don't understand," he said, and the flatness was gone from his voice completely now, and what was underneath it was so raw that Emily's chest ached to hear it. "If I put this down, I'm nothing. There's no me left. There's no file, no name, no record. They made sure of that. They built me to not exist. At least like this, I'm something. At least like this, the men who threw me away have to look at what they made. If I stop, I just disappear. I go back to being the thing they buried. Nobody even knows I'm alive." "I know you're alive," Emily said. 4 words. She said them, and the rifle on the shelf dipped just slightly, the barrel drifting down off of Delgado's chest by an inch, then 2. "I know you're alive," she said again. "I've known your name this whole time, and I never forgot it, not once in 9 years. Daniel Cole. Best raw talent I ever put my hands on. Reloaded so fast you'd grin. Asked better questions than any student I ever had. Called me teacher like it was a thing worth being. I remember all of it. You are not erased, Daniel. You were never erased. You were remembered this whole time by the one person who was there when you were still a person, and I'm standing 40 yards behind you right now, telling you that person is still in there because a turned-off ghost put his crosshairs on an old man 3 minutes ago and could not pull the trigger. Her voice broke finally just at the edge, and she let it. Put it down. Come home. Not to them, not to Voss. To the one person left who knows your real name and never once used it against you. Put the rifle down and turn around and let me see my student's face. For 3 seconds, nothing moved on that hilltop, and then slowly the rifle came off Ray Delgado. Daniel Cole set it down on the rock in front of him, and he raised his hands empty, and he turned around, and Emily Carter looked at the face of the boy she'd made 9 years older, hollowed out and haunted and exhausted, past the edge of what a person can carry, and she lowered her own rifle the rest of the way and let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for a decade. There he is, she said quietly. There's my student. Cole's face crumpled. Whatever they'd built to hold him together came apart all at once, and he sank down onto the rock shelf with his empty hands hanging between his knees, and he did not cry. He had probably forgotten how, but his whole body shook with the effort of not doing it, and Emily crossed the last of the distance and knelt down in front of him and did the thing no one had done for him in 9 years. She put a hand on the back of his neck the way you'd steady a man who'd been drowning, and she held on. It's over, she said. It's over. You're done. You don't have to be the weapon anymore. I've got you. Down the hill, Reeves finally moved cautiously when the silence held, and no shot came working his way up the slope with his weapon lowered, and Delgado came down off the porch. An old man in a flannel shirt with his coffee still in his hand, and the four of them came together on that hillside in the gray morning, and for one moment it seemed like the worst thing had already happened and been survived. That was the moment the radio in Cole's vest crackled. Emily felt him go rigid under her hand. A voice came through, and it was not a voice she knew smooth and unhurried and cold in a way that Cole's had never quite managed a voice used to being obeyed. Cole, status. You've missed 2 check-ins. Is Delgado down? Cole's face, which had just barely begun to come back to life, went white. That's my handler, he whispered. That's the man who ran the program. That's who's been pointing me down the list. Emily's blood ran cold. You said it was Voss. You said Voss threw you away. Voss threw me away, Cole said, and his eyes were wide with a fear that had nothing to do with rifles. But Voss isn't the one who picked me back up. Somebody found me after. Somebody who had the whole file, all of it, the mountain, the team, you, everything. Somebody who told me who to hit and when. I thought I was doing my own revenge. I thought the list was mine. His hand started to shake again, worse now. But it was never mine, was it? It was his. He's been using me the whole time the same way they always use me, and I was too far gone to see it. Who? Reeves demanded, kneeling beside them. Cole, who's your handler? Who has the whole file? And on the radio, as if it had heard the question, the smooth, cold voice spoke again, and this time there was something almost amused in it. Iron Wolf, I know you're there. Cole's been off comms too long, and there's only one person on this earth who could have gotten to that shelf without dying on the way. So let me be the first to welcome you back. A pause. I've waited 9 years for you to surface. I even let you keep your quiet little life in the desert, because a quiet Iron Wolf is a predictable Iron Wolf. And I always knew that when I finally needed to draw you out, all I'd have to do was reach for one of your mountain men, and you'd come running. And here you are, right on schedule. Emily's mouth had gone dry. Who is this? You don't recognize the voice, the man said. That hurts, teacher. Though I suppose I've had a lot of years to practice sounding like someone else. Let me make it simple. A beat. You once asked Voss what happened to your student, and Voss told you the program failed. Voss lied. But then Voss lied about a great many things because Voss was following orders. My orders. You see, the program didn't fail Iron Wolf. It succeeded beyond anything the brass imagined. It succeeded so well that I built a second one. And a third. Cole was never the only ghost I made from your doctrine. The voice softened into something almost tender, and it was the most frightening sound Emily had ever heard. I studied you for years. Every shot, every read, every trick in that sealed file. I took what made you the best, and I built an entire program out of it, and Cole was just the first draft. He was always meant to draw you out and then be discarded. The men on the mountain were just the bait to make you come. And now that you've come, Now that the real Iron Wolf is finally standing in the open, instead of hiding in a desert, I can finally do the thing I've wanted to do for 9 years. Emily was on her feet now, scanning the ridge lines, the tree lines, the high ground in every direction, because that voice had the calm certainty of a man who was watching. "And what's that?" she said. "Test my work against the original," the voice said. "Cole was the first draft, but I've had 9 years and a great deal of funding since then. Look east, teacher, on the far ridge, the one you didn't check because you assumed one shooter." Emily's head snapped east, and on the far ridge, a full 1,000 yards out on ground, she had dismissed because Cole's position could not have covered it. Sunlight caught for half a second on glass. A scope. Then further along the same ridge, a second flash. Then a third. 3 shooters, on the high ground, on 4 people standing in the open in the middle of a cleared field that Ray Delgado had built to have no cover at all. "Cole was my worst," the voice said pleasantly. "These 3 are my best, and they were all trained on your doctrine. Iron Wolf every trick you ever put in that file, which means for the first time in your life, you're not the most dangerous shooter on the field. You're outnumbered, you're outranged, you're standing in the open ground, your own friend cleared, and the only cover for 100 yards in any direction is the rifle in your hands and whatever's left in that legendary head of yours." A pause, and then the voice delivered the last of it, soft as a blade. "So let's find out, teacher. Let's find out whether the original is still better than the copies. You've got about 10 seconds before my people decide the reunion's over." "I'd start running if I were you, though I should mention, I taught them to account for that." The radio went dead, and on the far ridge, 1,000 yards out, 3 scopes settled onto 4 people, standing in the open. And Emily Carter looked at the old operator she'd come to save, and the commander who'd pulled her out of hiding, and the broken student kneeling at her feet, and understood in one cold heartbeat that the whole thing, the kill list, the mountain, the rumor that reached Reeves, the boot that kicked her rifle case across a training yard 3 days ago, every single piece of it had been built by someone patient and brilliant and monstrous for one purpose only: to bring Iron Wolf out of the desert and into a field with no cover, so he could kill her with her own teachings and prove that the copies had finally surpassed the original. "Everybody down," she said, "now," and the first 3 rounds left the far ridge at the same instant. The first 3 rounds left the far ridge at the same instant, and Emily Carter did the only thing 9 years of buried instinct left her able to do. She did not dive for cover that did not exist. She did the opposite of what the copies had been trained to expect, because she was the one who had written the doctrine they'd been trained on, and she knew exactly what that doctrine said about a target caught in the open. It said, the target runs. It said the target panics and breaks for the nearest low ground and gives you a predictable line. So Emily did not run. "Delgado, don't move," she shouted. "Reeves, Cole, freeze. Nobody breaks hold exactly where you are." And she yanked all of them down flat in the same motion, not toward cover, just down flat to the earth in the last place 3 snipers accounting for a running target would put their crosshairs. The 3 rounds cracked through the air where 4 standing people had been a half second earlier, where the doctrine said they should have been mid-stride toward the tree line, and all 3 shots found nothing but morning air. "They shot where we were going to be," Reeves gasped, face pressed into the dirt. "Not where we were. They shot where I taught them we'd be going," Emily said. "That's the only edge I've got. They know my doctrine. They don't know the parts I never wrote down." Her mind was moving faster than it had moved in a decade, the cold clarity flooding back, every variable snapping into place. 3 shooters, 1,000 yards elevated on ground she'd dismissed. 4 people flat in the open with maybe 15 seconds before the copies adjusted and realized their targets hadn't run. "Cole, look at me. Are you with me? All the way with me? Or are you still somewhere in your own head? Because I need an answer right now, and there's no room for maybe." Cole lifted his face from the dirt, and something had changed in it. The hollowness was still there, but there was something underneath it now. Something that looked almost like the boy who used to grin over a fast reload. "I'm with you, teacher." "Then I need everything you know about those 3, Emily said. "You said he made others. You said Cole was the first draft. Did you ever meet them? Did you ever see them shoot? Anything, Cole, anything at all, because right now you know more about the men trying to kill us than I do." "I met 2 of them once," Cole said, and he was talking fast now, the training kicking in through the fear. "At a facility years ago before they sent me out. They're good teacher. They're scary, good, but they're not you. They're copies. They shoot the doctrine clean perfect like it's scripture. That's their weakness. They do it exactly the way the file says. They never improvise because the program beat improvisation out of them. They punished any shot that deviated from the doctrine, even when the deviation would have worked better. They're machines running your program. But you, he looked at her, you break your own rules. You always did. That's the thing about you nobody could ever copy. And Emily Carter, flat on her belly, in a killing field with a 1,000-yard rifle team, adjusting fire on her position, felt something like hope for the first time since the far ridge flashed. Because he was right. He was exactly right. She had spent 8 months teaching Daniel Cole every rule and then spent the last hour proving that the one thing she never taught him was when to break every rule she'd made. Okay, she breathed. Okay, here's what's true. They're perfect, and perfect is predictable, and predictable dies. Cole that far, ridge the 3 positions, you saw the flashes same as me. Left center, right spread across maybe 80 yards of high ground. If they're running my doctrine clean, then they've assigned targets exactly the way the file says to assign targets in a multi-shooter Overwatch. Highest value target goes to the center shooter, the best of the 3, because center has the widest field. So center is on me, left and right have the rest of you. She was already working the angles. The doctrine says the center shooter takes the priority target and the flanks take targets of opportunity, which means the moment I move, all 3 scopes track me because I'm the priority. I'm the whole reason we're here. Their handler wants me. He said it himself. He wants to kill the original with the copies. So don't move, Reeves said. If you moving pulls all 3 onto you, that's exactly why I move, Emily said. That's the plan. I move all 3 track me, and for the 2 or 3 seconds they're all locked onto one target, the rest of you are invisible. That's your window. When I go, the 3 of you go the other way, toward the house, toward Delgado's cleared ground, and you get inside those walls because a house is cover, and cover changes everything. She looked at Delgado. You built a killing field around your home, old man. 100 yards of nothing, so nobody could approach unseen. Well, it works both ways. Nobody can approach, and nobody up on that ridge can follow you inside once you're through the door. Get to the house. Get behind walls. That's not negotiable. And what about you, Delgado said. You draw all 3, and then what? You're 1 shooter in the open against 3 on the high ground. That's not a fight, Wolf. That's a firing squad. It's a firing squad if I play it their way, Emily said. So I'm not going to play it their way. She was already gathering herself, already coiling the way she'd coiled behind the truck an hour ago, a lifetime ago. There's a fold in the ground 30 yards to my left, a little erosion cut shallow, but it runs downhill toward that stand of rock at the base of the hill. It's the one piece of dead ground between here and cover. 3 shooters running my doctrine clean will have already dismissed it because the doctrine says a cut that shallow doesn't provide viable concealment for a moving target. She almost smiled. The doctrine's wrong. I know it's wrong because I'm the one who decided how deep a cut had to be before it counted, and I set that number high on purpose so that anyone using my file would dismiss exactly the kind of ground I'd actually use. I built a blind spot into my own doctrine 9 years ago in case I ever had to fight someone who'd studied me. Her jaw set. Looks like today's the day I find out if it worked. Cole stared at her. You planned for this. 9 years ago. You planned for someone stealing your doctrine and using it against you. I planned for everything, Daniel, Emily said quietly. That's the part they could never copy. Not the shooting, the planning, the assuming that someday the worst possible person would have everything I know, and building the escape hatch before I ever needed it. She looked at the 3 of them, flat in the dirt waiting. On my go, I break left for the cut. All 3 scopes come with me. The second they do, you 3 break right for the house and you run like the doctrine says a panicked target runs because that's the one time being predictable will save your life. They'll be too busy tracking me to fire on the targets doing exactly what they expect. Get inside, bar the door, wait for me. And if you don't come, Reeves said, then I bought you a house full of walls and a shooter named Cole who knows how these ghosts think, Emily said. That's a fighting chance. That's more than we had 10 seconds ago. She met Reeves's eyes. Hold the position, Daniel, same as before. When I move, do not watch me. Do not wait to see if I make it. You run and you get them inside and you trust that I've been doing this since before those copies could hold a rifle. Can you do that? Reeves's throat worked. God help me, yes. Cole, she turned to her student one last time. When you get inside, you find a window with an angle on that far ridge and you make yourself useful because I need those three thinking about incoming fire, not just outgoing. You don't have to hit anything. You just have to make them flinch. A copy that's never been shot at doesn't know how to keep shooting when the rounds start coming back. That's the other thing the program couldn't give them. They've never once been afraid. You have. Use it. Cole nodded, and for 1 second, the boy she'd trained looked back at her with something that was almost the old grin, almost, and he said, yes, teacher. On 3, Emily said, and she gathered herself, and the whole world narrowed down to 30 yards of open ground and a shallow cut that the doctrine said was too shallow to matter, and she counted it out the way she'd counted 1,000 shots, calm level. The fear folded away somewhere she couldn't feel it. 1. Far out on the ridge, 3 scopes hunted across the cleared ground, 3 copies of her own eye, searching for the priority target, waiting for the original to do the predictable thing. 2. She felt Delgado tense beside her, and Reeves and Cole, all 3 of them, coiled to run the wrong way on purpose, to bet their lives on doing exactly what the enemy expected. 3. And Emily Carter came up out of the dirt and broke left, low and fast, pouring herself toward the shallow cut, and the whole far ridge lit up at once as 3 shooters found the priority target and committed, and rounds began to chew the ground behind her heels, tracking closing exactly as fast as she'd taught them to track. And in the same instant, 3 people ran the other way, toward a house full of walls, and for the 2 seconds it took 3 copies to lock onto the woman who'd written their doctrine, nobody was watching the targets doing the predictable thing at all. The cut caught her and swallowed her low, and she rolled into it as the rounds walked across the lip above her head, spitting dirt, and she kept moving downhill. Through ground, the doctrine swore no one could use, and behind her she heard the beautiful sound of a screen door slamming, and knew that Reeves and Cole and Delgado had reached the house, had made it through, were behind walls now, with 100 yards of cleared killing ground between them and anyone who wanted in. The plan had worked. The first move had worked. She was alive in dead ground and her people were in cover. She had also just made herself the only target on the field alone in the open ground below 3 shooters, who now had nothing else to shoot at. And as she pressed into the shallow cut and heard the rounds probing the earth around her, searching, adjusting, and the handler's voice came back to her from the dead radio she'd left behind, soft and certain and monstrously calm, and she understood that the real test was only just beginning. Because now it was one shooter in a cut too shallow to survive in against 3 of the best students her own doctrine had ever produced. And the only thing standing between Iron Wolf and the end of everything was the one thing she'd never written in any file, the one thing no program could copy: the willingness to throw out every rule she'd ever made in the half second before a rule got her killed. She checked the junk gun, 1 round chambered, a full load beneath it. The oldest, ugliest, best shooting rifle on a base full of better ones, the one nobody wanted carried by the one they'd all underestimated. All right, Emily Carter whispered into the dirt to herself, to the ghost of the teacher she used to be to the 3 copies hunting her across the morning. Let's find out. And she began to move. She began to move, and the first thing she did was throw out the doctrine. Not all of it, just the piece that would have killed her. The doctrine said a shooter in dead ground stays low and works toward cover and never, ever exposes herself to 3 elevated guns. The doctrine was written for people who wanted to survive a fight. Emily Carter was not trying to survive this fight. She was trying to end it, and those are not the same thing, and understanding the difference was the last edge she had left. Cole, she said into her own throat mic, praying he'd found a working radio inside the house. Cole, if you can hear me, I need eyes. Tell me what the far ridge is doing. I can't see them from down here, and I'm about to do something stupid. Static, then faint, his voice tight with concentration. I hear you. I've got a window on the ridge. All 3 are up. They've lost you in the cut. They're glassing the ground trying to reacquire. Center shooter's the calmest. He's not panicking. He's waiting for you to move. Left and right are jumpy. They keep swinging their scopes. They're not used to a target they can't find. That's because they have never hunted anything that hunts back, Emily said. Cole, listen close. You said they run the doctrine clean. So they're all going to be thinking the same thought right now, the thought the file puts in your head when you lose a target in dead ground. What's the thought? Say it. What does the doctrine tell a shooter to do when the target vanishes into a cut? A pause. She could hear him thinking, hear him reaching back into the training she'd once put in his hands. Cover the exit, he said slowly. The doctrine says a cut has to end somewhere. So you stop hunting the target and you range the exit points and you wait because the target has to come out eventually. And when they do, you've already got your crosshairs where they'll appear. That's right, Emily said, and something cold and certain settled into her voice. That's exactly right. All three of them are ranging the mouth of this cut right now, the place the doctrine says I have to come out. They've stopped hunting me, and they're all staring at one spot waiting for me to stick my head into it. She was already moving, but not toward the exit. She was moving backward uphill against the flow of the ground toward the one direction three shooters covering an exit would never watch. So I'm not going to come out the exit. I'm going to come out this entrance, right back where I went in. The highest ground in the cut, the closest point to their own ridge, the last place three men staring downhill at the mouth would ever check. Teacher, that puts you closer to them, not farther. Closer is the point, Emily said. At 1,000 yards, their copies of my doctrine are perfect. But the doctrine has a hole in it at range, a hole I built, because I always knew that someday the thing I feared most was a shooter who knew everything I knew. So I left one lie in the file. One number buried in the ballistics tables wrong on purpose. The drop calculation past 800 yards. It's off, just slightly. Just enough that a shooter running my numbers clean will aim a hair high at long range and never know why they're missing by inches. She reached the high lip of the cut, the entrance, the forgotten ground. They've been trained to trust the table. I've been lying in that table for 9 years. So at 1,000 yards, they think they're perfect, and they're actually shooting 6 inches high, and they have no idea because the doctrine told them the number, and the doctrine is Scripture, and you don't question Scripture. Her breath was steady. But it means I can't fight them at 1,000 yards either, because if I close the distance, the lie stops mattering. So I do the opposite. I make them come to me. I make them leave the ridge. How do you make 3 snipers leave the high ground? You give them something they can't resist, Emily said. You give them the priority target in the open close, an easy shot, the shot their handlers been dreaming about for 9 years. You give them Iron Wolf standing up exposed, begging to be killed. And Cole understood, and his voice came back horrified. No, teacher, no. You're going to bait them with yourself if even one of them corrects for the drop, if even one of them figures out the table's wrong before you. Then I die, Emily said simply. Same as always. Fast in the open, betting my life on a lie I told 9 years ago. But here's the thing, Daniel, they won't correct. Because correcting means questioning the doctrine, and the program beat questioning out of them. You said so yourself. They'll take the perfect shot the file promised them, and the file will lie to them the way I built it to lie, and they'll miss high all 3 at the exact same instant. And in the half second while 3 copies are staring at the empty air, where I should have died and trying to understand why the Scripture failed them, I'm going to answer the one question the whole morning's been asking. Her hand tightened on the junk gun. Whether the original is still better than the copies. There was a long silence on the radio. Then Delgado's rough old voice came through because he'd taken the handset. Wolf, you told me 9 years ago that nobody had to die today. You still believe that? No, Emily said quietly. Somebody has to die today, Ray. But it's not going to be 4 good people in a house. It's going to be 3 ghosts on a ridge who never got the chance to be anything but weapons. And I'm sorrier about that than you'll ever know, because somebody made them the same way somebody made me. And the only difference between us is that I got out and they didn't. Her voice hardened. But sorry doesn't stop a bullet. So here's what happens now. Cole, when I stand up, you count. The instant they fire, you'll see 3 muzzle flashes on that ridge. You call them out to me, left, center, right in the order you see them, and you call them fast because I'm going to have about 2 seconds to put 3 rounds into 3 positions. I can't see until they shoot, and the only way I make that work is if you're my eyes. A pause. You were the fastest student I ever had, Daniel. Fastest reload, fastest read. Today I need the fastest call of your life. Can you give it to me? Yes, teacher. No hesitation. The boy she'd made all the way back now, all the way with her. Then here we go, Emily said, and Iron Wolf stood up. She stood up in the open on the high lip of the cut closer to the enemy ridge than any sane shooter would ever stand, and she made herself the easiest target in the world. Arms loose, rifle low, the priority target the handler had waited 9 years to kill, offered up like a sacrifice on the cleared ground, and 1,000 yards away, 3 copies of her own eyes settled their crosshairs onto her chest, and 3 fingers took up the slack the way she'd taught, and the handler's voice somewhere out there watching must have been singing. Steady, she breathed to herself, to Cole, to the ghost of the teacher she used to be. Let them commit. Let them trust the number. 3 rifles fired at once. Flashes! Cole's voice exploded in her ear. Left, center, right, all 3, they all fired. And 3 rounds cut the air exactly 6 inches over Emily Carter's head, high, all 3 high, because 3 shooters had trusted a ballistics table that a woman had poisoned 9 years ago against exactly this morning. And for 1/2 second, 3 copies stared through their scopes at a target who should have been dead and was not at empty air where the scripture had promised to kill, and could not understand why the doctrine had failed them. Emily was already moving. The rifle came up with that terrible stillness, and Cole was calling fast, the fastest read of his life. Center first, he's the calmest, he'll recover first, center. She put the crosshairs where the center flash had been held for the drop she knew was real, because she was the only one who knew the table was a lie, and fired. 1,000 yards away, the center shooter, the best of the 3, the one who would have figured it out first, went still forever. Left. Cole called, left, swinging. He saw center drop. He's panicking. He's breaking doctrine. And there it was, the thing the copies could never do, the thing the program had beaten out of them. The left shooter panicked. He'd never been shot at. He'd never watched a partner die. He did the one thing his training had no answer for. He broke from his position in raw animal fear, and a shooter who breaks from cover in the open is not a sniper anymore. He's just a man in a scope, and Emily Carter had been putting men in the scope since before he'd learned to hold a rifle. She fired. The left ridge went quiet. Right, Cole shouted it. Right, still on you. He didn't panic. He's the last one. He's correcting teacher. He figured it out. He's adjusting for the drop. He knows the table's wrong. And that was the moment. The one moment in the whole morning that mattered. One shooter left the last copy, and unlike the other 2, he had done the impossible thing. He had questioned the scripture. He had felt the rounds go high and understood in one brilliant, terrible instant that the number was a lie, and he was correcting for it, now dropping his aim the 6 inches the table had stolen from him, and in one more half second, he would fire a perfect shot, the shot the handler had built 3 programs in 9 years to create, the copy that had finally, at the very last, surpassed the original. He was faster than Emily expected. He was better than Cole. He was, in that half second, everything the handler had promised a shooter who could break the doctrine when the doctrine failed him, the one thing that was supposed to be hers alone, but he had corrected for the wrong lie. Because Emily Carter had not put 1 lie in that file, she had put 2. The drop table was the lie. The copies were supposed to find the obvious one, the one a good shooter would catch under fire. And buried underneath it deeper was the second lie, the win value off in the opposite direction, so that any shooter clever enough to correct the drop would correct it into the teeth of a windage error he'd never think to question, because he'd be so proud of catching the first lie that he'd never look for the second. The last copy corrected the drop perfectly, brilliantly, the best raw talent the program ever made. And then he trusted the win number, because even a shooter who questions one thing has to trust something, and he fired his perfect shot into a windage lie a woman had buried 9 years ago for exactly this half second. His round missed Emily Carter by 4 inches to the left. Hers did not miss him. And then the ridge was silent, and the morning was silent, and Iron Wolf stood alone in the cleared ground with the junk gun still against her shoulder, and 3 copies of herself gone quiet on the high ground forever. And for a long moment, she did not move at all, because the thing she'd just done was the thing she'd spent 9 years in the desert trying to never do again. And doing it had cost her something she wasn't sure she'd get back. Then the radio crackled, the handler's voice, and it was not calm anymore. That's not possible, he said, and his composure was gone, stripped down to something raw and disbelieving. 3 shooters, my best work, 9 years. That's not possible, no one is that. There were 2 lies in the file, Emily said quietly. You only ever found the shooting. You studied every shot I ever took, and you built 3 men out of it, and you never once understood that the shooting was the least of what made me dangerous. The shooting is the part you can copy. The lying, the planning, the willingness to poison my own doctrine, and wait 9 years for someone exactly like you to trust it, that's the part you can't. You can't build a person who assumes the worst version of you is coming and prepares for them a decade in advance. You can only be born wrong enough to think that way, or made wrong enough. And I was made wrong the same as your copies, the same as Cole, the same as you probably made yourself somewhere along the line. The difference is I spent 9 years trying to become something better than what they made me. And you spent 9 years trying to make it worse. You think this is over, the handler said. You think 3 dead assets ends it. I have the file Iron Wolf. I have all of it. I can make more. I can make 10 more. You can't win a war against a program by killing 3 of its products in a field. I know, Emily said. And that was the twist that took the breath out of him, because she said it like she'd already known it for an hour. You're right. I can't win this in a field. Killing your copies doesn't touch you. You'll build more. You said it yourself, and you meant it, and you are correct. A pause. Which is why I never planned to win this in a field. This was never the real fight. This was just the part where I made you show yourself. Her voice went very soft. You've been talking to me for the last 10 minutes on a secure military channel, using a voice you spent 9 years learning to fake, feeling very safe, 1,000 yards away. And this whole time there's been a commander named Daniel Reeves sitting in that house with the file open in front of him and a triangulation running on your transmission, and every single word you said to gloat has been another 12 seconds of you holding a mic while the people you thought were pinned down in a killing field mapped exactly where you're broadcasting from. The silence on the radio was absolute. You wanted to test the copies against the original, Emily said. But you made the original's mistake for her. You couldn't resist watching. You couldn't resist talking. You had to be here close enough to see it, close enough to gloat, because being the man who finally killed Iron Wolf was the whole point, and a man like you doesn't do the whole point from a bunker on the other side of the world. You're here, you're close, and you've been on the radio for 10 minutes. Her voice hardened into something final. Reeves, you got it. Reeves's voice came through steady and grim. Got it. Fixed his position 90 seconds ago. He's on the near ridge, the one behind us, the one nobody was watching because everybody was looking east. I already sent it up. There's a team inbound, 4 minutes out. And on the radio for the first time, the handler made a sound that was almost human. A short, disbelieving breath, because he understood all at once that he had lost the same way his copies had lost, by trusting his own certainty, by believing that because he had studied Iron Wolf, he had understood her, when the whole time the thing that made her dangerous was that she let you believe you understood her right up until the moment it killed you. You planned this, he said. The field, the copies. You let me put you in the open. You let 3 shooters fire on you, so I'd stay on the radio to watch. I planned for everything, Emily said for the second time that morning. It's the part they could never copy. She lowered the rifle. You have 4 minutes, I'd run. Though I should mention, there's one road off that ridge, and I taught the man who's about to be waiting on you. His name's Cole. You remember Cole, your first draft, the one you threw away. He's very much looking forward to meeting the man who's been holding his leash for 9 years. A pause. I taught him everything I know. Well, almost everything. There's always one thing you hold back. The radio went dead. It did not come back on. They took the handler alive in the end, on the one road off the near ridge exactly where Emily said he'd be, by a broken young shooter named Daniel Cole, who did not fire a single round because Emily had asked him not to, because the whole point of the last 9 years had been proving that a person made into a weapon could choose at the very end to be something else. Cole put the man on the ground and held him there, and did not pull the trigger. And when the team arrived 4 minutes later, they found the architect of the whole nightmare face down in the dirt with his own first draft standing over him, empty-handed, shaking free. The file came apart after that, Reeves made sure of it. The program that copies the men above Voss who had funded a machine to turn Iron Wolf's doctrine into disposable ghosts, all of it dragged into rooms with hard light and harder questions. And this time nobody got to seal it because Iron Wolf was alive and awake and unwilling to disappear a second time. Colonel Voss was found 3 weeks later alive and hiding a man who had spent 9 years running from the thing he'd helped build. And what happened to him after that is a longer story and not this one. Ray Delgado went back to his coffee. He walked Emily to the vehicle when it was over an old operator in a flannel shirt, and he took her hand in both of his the way he had once talked to her over a radio on a frozen ridge, and he said, "You came all the way out of the ground to save an old man who told you to stay buried. I don't know how to thank a person for that." "You already did," Emily said. 9 years ago, 9 words. I've been paying it back ever since. The other 7 men on the list lived, every one of them. The killing stopped the day the field went quiet, and somewhere in the country, there were 7 households that never knew how close the list had come to their door. And that was the way Emily wanted it, because the whole point had never been to be seen doing it. She flew back to the Mojave 2 days later. Back to the base, back to the training yard where a general had kicked her rifle case across the floor a lifetime ago. And the story had traveled the way stories do, so that when she walked back onto that range, there was no laughing this time. Only 40 young SEAL candidates standing very still and very quiet, and a young man named Jake Morrison at the front of them who stepped forward and did not make a joke, who looked at the woman he'd mocked and said simply, "Ma'am, it'd be an honor if you'd teach us. Any of it. Anything you're willing to give." Emily looked at him for a long moment, and then she looked past him at all of them, at the young faces that reminded her in ways that hurt of another young face she'd once trained and lost and nearly had to kill. "I'll teach you," she said, "but not the shooting. Anybody can teach you the shooting." She set her rifle case down on the bench gently, the way she'd picked it up off the floor that first day. "I'll teach you the thing that actually matters. I'll teach you when to put it down. Because the strongest thing I ever did wasn't a shot. It was walking away and staying human and choosing to be a person instead of a legend and being ready to pick it up again only when people I loved were going to die if I didn't." She looked at Jake. "The rifle's the easy part. Knowing what you're willing to become and what you're not, that's the whole war. Everything else is just distance and wind." Commander Reeves offered her a place, a real one with a name and a rank and a file that wouldn't be sealed. She turned it down, and when he asked her why standing on that same range in the desert light, she gave him the answer she'd been carrying the whole time. "Because I already know who I am now," she said. "I spent 9 years afraid the desert made me into nobody, but it didn't. It made me into a person who could choose, and a person who can choose doesn't need the name to prove she's real." She picked up the junk gun, the ugly old rifle nobody had wanted, the one that had outshot every better weapon on the base, and she cleaned it slowly the way she had that first day, and she smiled. "Let them keep Iron Wolf in the sealed file. I don't need her anymore. I've got something better. I've got my own name and my own hands, and a yard full of kids who need to learn the one lesson nobody taught me until it almost cost me everything." She stayed. She taught. And the legend they'd once called Iron Wolf spent the rest of her days in a quiet desert yard, not proving she was the most dangerous shooter alive, but making certain that every young person who passed through her hands learned the truth that had nearly died with her on a hillside. That a warrior is not the weapon they carry, but the person who decides when to lay it down. Emily Carter had walked away from being a legend once, and she had come back only when it counted, and then she had walked away again on her own terms, whole and human and free. And that, in the end, was the shot that no copy could ever make, and the reason the ones who knew her would remember for the rest of their lives exactly why they had once called her Iron Wolf. 6 months later, on a cold, clear morning in the Mojave, Emily Carter was cleaning the junk gun when a black sedan came up the access road that nobody was supposed to use without clearance. She didn't stop cleaning. She'd learned a long time ago that the fastest way to look dangerous was to keep doing something ordinary while a car full of strangers decided what they were. So she ran the cloth along the old barrel and watched the sedan out of the corner of her eye, and when it stopped and the door opened and Daniel Cole stepped out, she set the rifle down and let herself smile for the first time in a week. He looked different. That was the thing that hit her before anything else. 6 months ago, he'd been hollow, a man scraped out from the inside, all sharp edges and dead eyes. Now there was weight to him again, the good kind, the kind a person carries when they've started sleeping through the night. He walked toward her across the yard, and he didn't move like a weapon anymore. He moved like a man. "They let you out," Emily said. They let me out, Cole said. Took 6 months of rooms and questions and doctors who wanted to know what was left in my head. Reeves fought for me the whole way. Whole way. Kept telling them a man who chooses not to pull the trigger with the target on the ground is worth more than a man who never had the target at all. He stopped a few feet from her, suddenly awkward, a boy again. He said something else too. He said the only reason I got to make that choice on the road was because you gave it to me. You could have had them wait on that ridge with rifles. You told them to take me alive with empty hands. He said you insisted. I did. Why? Emily picked up the rifle again because her own hands needed something to do. Because somebody made you into a thing that only knew how to take life. And the only way to prove they didn't win was to give you one chance to do the opposite. If you'd have gone for a weapon on that road, that would have been on them, not you, and I'd have grieved you the way I've grieved you for 9 years. She looked at him. But you didn't. You stood over the man who ruined your life, and you kept your hands empty. That was the whole test, Daniel. Not the shooting, that, and you passed it. So they let you out because a man who can do that isn't a weapon anymore. He's a person who used to be a weapon and decided to stop. Those are different. That's the only difference that's ever mattered. Cole was quiet for a while. The wind moved across the empty range. Then he said the thing he'd driven 4 hours to say. I don't know how to be a person. I never learned. They took me at 19 and they made me into a ghost, and I'm 31 now, and I've never had a life, not one day of it. I don't know how to have breakfast without a mission. I don't know what I'm for. His voice cracked the way it had cracked on that ridge. Reeves said you might know how. He said you figured it out in this desert cleaning other people's rifles, 3 years of being nobody until you knew who you were. He said if anybody could teach a broken weapon how to be a human being, it'd be the woman who taught it how to shoot. He looked at the ground. So I came to ask, not for a god, not for a mission. I came to ask if you'd teach me the thing you are teaching those kids. The lesson. When to put it down. What comes after. A pause. I don't have anywhere else to go, teacher. You're the only person alive who ever knew my real name and never used it to point me at somebody. And Emily Carter, who had spent 9 years learning that the strongest thing a person could do was choose, looked at the student she'd made and lost and almost had to kill and saved. And she understood that the whole long road, the boot on her rifle case, the red folder, the mountain, the copies on the ridge, all of it had been leading her here to a cold morning and a broken man asking to be taught how to live. You want to know what comes after, she said, after the weapon, after you put it down. Yes. Nobody knows, Emily said. That's the secret nobody tells you. There's no manual. There's no doctrine for being a person. And if there were, it'd be full of lies anyway, same as every other file. You just wake up one morning and you decide who you're going to be that day, and then you do it, and then you wake up the next morning and you decide again. That's the whole thing. That's the entire war, and you fight it every single day for the rest of your life, and the only weapon that works is the decision to keep fighting it. She handed him the junk gun. Just handed it to him, the ugly old rifle that had outshot every better weapon on the base. Here, clean this. Cole took it confused. You want me to? You want to learn how to be a person, Emily said. Start here. Start with taking care of something. Not because it's a mission, not because somebody ordered it, because it needs doing, and you're here, and your hands know how. That's how it starts, Daniel. Small. You take care of one thing, then another. And one day you look up and you've got a life, and you can't even point to the moment it had happened because it happened in 1,000 small, ordinary mornings while you weren't watching. She sat down on the bench. That's what the desert taught me. Not how to disappear, how to take care of things. Rifles at first because that's what I knew. Then people. Then myself, which was the hardest one and the last one I learned. She looked at him. You'll learn it too. It just takes longer than anybody wants it to. So Daniel Cole cleaned the rifle. He sat down on the bench next to the teacher who'd made him, and he ran the cloth along the old barrel, and neither of them said anything for a long time, and it was the first peaceful silence he'd had in 9 years. He stayed. There was a spare room in the small house Emily kept off the base, and he took it, and for a while he just existed there, learning the shape of ordinary days. He learned how to make coffee for 2 people. He learned how to sit on a porch and watch a sunrise without ranging it. He learned how to sleep past dawn, which took the longest because his body had been trained for years to come awake with the light already hunting. Emily didn't push him. She'd been where he was. She knew that healing couldn't be ordered any more than it could be rushed, that it came the way the desert came into you, slowly, one quiet day at a time, until one morning you noticed it had been a while since the nightmares came and you couldn't remember exactly when they'd stopped. The candidates on the base got used to seeing him. At first, they didn't know what to make of the quiet man who followed the weapons specialist around. But Emily told them the truth, or as much of it as they needed, that he was a shooter. She'd once trained a good one who'd been through something bad and was finding his way back. And young men who trained to run toward danger, they'd understand better than most what it cost to come home from it. They made room for him. Jake Morrison, who had grown up considerably in 6 months, was the first to sit with him at meals, and the two of them, the arrogant boy who'd learned humility, and the broken man who was learning to be whole, became something like friends. It was Jake who noticed it first, actually. 3 months into Cole's stay on a range day, when one of the candidates was struggling with a long shot and getting frustrated and about to quit, Cole walked over without being asked and knelt down beside the kid and started talking low and patient, the way a good teacher talks, and within 10 minutes, the candidate put around exactly where he'd been missing it all morning. Jake watched the whole thing and then found Emily afterward. "He's a teacher," Jake said. "You see that? The way he broke it down for Reyes, that's not a shooter. That's a teacher." "I know," Emily said, and there was something in her voice, something warm and a little sad at the same time. "He always was, even when I trained him. He asked better questions than any student I ever had, and a person who asks good questions is a person who's meant to teach. They just don't always live long enough to figure it out." She watched Cole across the range, patient and quiet, with another struggling kid. He spent 9 years being pointed at people. Turns out what he was always for was standing next to them, showing them how. He just never got the chance to find out. Emily made it official a month after that. She went to Reeves, who had made sure to keep a line open to her, whether she wanted a rank or not, and she told him she wanted Daniel Cole certified as an instructor, cleared to teach on the range, with a real file and a real name and a real place in the world. Reeves fought for it the way he'd fought for everything about Cole, and it took time because the system that had made Cole a ghost was slow and ashamed and did not want to admit he existed. But Reeves was patient and Emily was stubborn, and between them they dragged Daniel Cole all the way back into the light, into a life with a name on it, into a job that let him spend his days building young people up instead of taking targets down. The day the paperwork came through, Cole read it 3 times before he believed it. Then he sat down on the bench where he'd cleaned the junk gun that first cold morning, and he put his face in his hands, and this time he did cry, finally, the tears that had been locked up since they took him at 19. And Emily sat down next to him and put her hand on the back of his neck, the way she had on the ridge, and she held on while 9 years came out of him all at once. "There he is," she said quietly, the same words she'd said on that hilltop with the rifle in her hands. "There's my student." "I don't know how to thank you," Cole said when he could talk again. "You gave me a life. You gave me a name. You could have let them kill me on that road or leave me in those rooms forever, and instead you gave me all of this, and I don't understand why. After everything I did, I put your friends on a kill list. I would have killed Delgado. Why would you?" "Because somebody should have done it for me," Emily said, "and nobody did. When they let me walk away, they didn't teach me how to live. They just opened the door and pushed me out into a desert and let me figure it out alone. And it almost broke me, Daniel. 3 years of not knowing who I was. I got through it, but barely, and I always swore that if I ever met somebody standing where I stood, I wouldn't let them do it alone." She looked at him. "You're not being forgiven because you deserve it. Forgiveness isn't about deserving. You're being given a life because somebody has to break the chain, and I decided a long time ago it was going to be me. They made me into a weapon. They made you into a weapon. And the only way to win, the only way to actually beat the people who do that to human beings is to prove that a weapon can become a person again. You're the proof, Daniel. You're my proof. Every day you get up and teach some kid how to be better. You're proof that they didn't win. That's why. That's the whole why. Years passed the way years do in the desert, slow and clean and full of light. The base changed around them. New commanders came and went. New classes of candidates cycled through hundreds of them over time, and every single one of them passed through a range run by two instructors who had once been the most dangerous shooters the country ever made and had chosen together to spend their lives making other people safe instead. They became a fixture, the two of them. The quiet woman and the patient man. The candidates didn't know the half of it, didn't know about the mountain or the copies or the kill list because none of that was ever unsealed. But they knew that the two instructors on the far range were the best they had ever trained under. And they knew that the lesson those two taught mattered more than marksmanship, though it took most of them years to understand what it was. Ray Delgado came to visit twice a year, every year. An old operator getting older, and he'd sit on the porch with Emily and Cole and drink coffee and not say much because men like Delgado had never needed many words. On one of those visits, near the end, when Delgado was very old and moving slow, he took Emily's hand in both of his, the way he always did, and he said, "You know what you built out here, Wolf? You know what this is?" "A range," Emily said. "A school." "No," Delgado said. "It's a place where broken things get put back together." That kid Cole, those candidates, yourself first of all, you took a piece of desert and you turned it into the one thing this whole line of work never gives anybody. A way home. He squeezed her hand. "I told you 9 years ago that nobody had to die on that hill. You proved me right in a way I never expected. You didn't just keep people alive, you gave them lives. That's more than any shot I ever saw you make, and I saw you make some impossible ones." Emily didn't say anything to that. She just watched the sunrise the way she had on the morning all of this began, the morning a general kicked her rifle case across the floor and a commander went white at the sight of an old emblem. She thought about how far a person could travel from a single moment, how the boot on her case had been the first domino in a chain that led here to a porch in the desert, to an old friend's hand in hers, and a healed student teaching on the range below, and a life she had built twice, once out of war, and once out of the wreckage of walking away from it. Cole married one of the base doctors, eventually a kind woman who'd never known him as anything but the gentle instructor on the far range. And Emily stood beside him at the wedding, and when the doctor asked her afterward quietly what Cole had been like when Emily first knew him, Emily said only lost. "He was lost when I found him, but he was always worth finding." And that was all she ever said about it, because some stories aren't ours to tell, and the kindest thing you can do for a person who's built a new life is let the old ones stay buried. They named their first child after her, Emily, and when the little girl was old enough to run around the range with her father chasing him across the same ground where he'd once knelt hollow and broken, cleaning a rifle he didn't want to put down, Emily Carter would watch them and feel something in her chest that she'd spent most of her life believing people like her didn't get to feel. Peace. The plain, ordinary, hard-won peace of a person who had finally completely become who she chose to be. She never picked up Iron Wolf again. The name stayed sealed the way she wanted it. There were threats over the years, the way there always are, and once or twice someone came asking whether the legend might be needed, whether the old ghost might come out of the desert one more time. And every time Emily Carter said no and meant it, and the person asking looked at the quiet woman on the range surrounded by candidates, and a healed student, and a little girl who bore her name. And they understood that Iron Wolf really was gone, not because she died, but because the person who'd worn that name had finally found something better to be. On the last morning of this story, though, it was only one of 10,000 ordinary mornings. By then, Emily sat on the porch with the junk gun across her knees, cleaning it the way she always had, and Danielle Cole came up the steps with 2 cups of coffee and sat down beside her, and his daughter played in the yard below, and the sun came up over the desert the way it had on the day it all began. "You ever regret it?" Cole asked. "Coming back, picking it up that one last time? You had your quiet life. You could have said no to Reeves and stayed nobody, and none of it would have touched you." Emily thought about it. She always answered his questions honestly because he'd earned that a long time ago. "No," she said, "because if I'd said no, you'd be dead, and Delgado'd be dead, and 7 other men, and there'd be a program out there right now making more ghosts out of kids like you were. I came back because people were going to die if I didn't, and that's the only reason worth coming back for. Not glory, not the name, just that." She ran the cloth down the old barrel one last time and set the rifle aside. "But here's the thing I understand now that I didn't understand then. The reason I could come back, the reason I could pick it up and use it and then put it down again and stay whole is because I'd already learned the lesson. I'd already become a person. The rifle didn't own me anymore, so I could use it without it taking me back. She looked at her student, at the man he'd become, at the good, clean life he'd built out of the wreckage. That's what I've been trying to teach you all these years. Not how to shoot. You always knew how to shoot. How to hold a weapon in your hands without letting it hold you. How to be dangerous and still be human. How to know all the way down that you are more than the worst thing they ever made you do. Cole was quiet for a moment. His daughter laughed in the yard below. I know it now, he said. I didn't for a long time, but I know it now. I know you do, Emily said. And she smiled and drank her coffee and watched the sun come up over the desert that had made her and unmade her and given her back to herself. The legend they once called Iron Wolf lived out her days in that quiet place, and she was never famous, and her name was never spoken in the halls where medals are given, and she wanted it exactly that way. Because she had learned the one truth that all her impossible shots had only been circling, that the greatest thing a person can do is not to become a legend, but to lay the legend down and pick up an ordinary life and take care of the broken people the world throws away one quiet morning at a time. Emily Carter had walked away from being a hero and come back when it counted and walked away again on her own terms. And in the end, she did not save the world with a rifle. She saved it one person at a time with her hands open and her weapon down, which is the only way the world has ever really been saved. That was her final shot, the one no copy could ever make and no file could ever seal, and it never missed.